So we're going to look at the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, and we're going to do a brief overview, and then we'll spend a lot more time in class digging into some of the details of this. But really, we're going to get to be able to describe the conditions under which allele and genotype frequencies will change in a population, and then explain the impacts on the population if any of the conditions of Hardy-Weinberg are not met. And so we'll get to play around a little bit with that today, and then really dive in. I'm zooming way in because I didn't leave enough space in this Hardy-Weinberg principle because there's a little bit of words. So just realize that we're going to write some small things here. But the Hardy-Weinberg principle is that the frequency, there's an E right here. Let's squeeze that guy in there. The frequency of alleles and therefore genotypes in a population's gene pool, so all the genes in that population, remains constant over generations unless acted upon by agents, and we're going to look at those 5 agents in a minute, other than normal sexual recombination. So what are those 5 things that have to be met in order for a population to remain at what we call Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, or have their allele frequencies not change? So there's 5 conditions in order for that to happen. We need a large population. We need random mating. And what we mean by that is they're not picking a mate based on any particular trait. It is random. So they're not saying, hey, you're tall, and so you're going to survive better. Or you have a bigger mane as a lion, and so you're going to survive better. Or a bigger roar, or anything like that. It is random. They're isolated from other populations, meaning there's no gene flow in or out of the population. So isolation from other populations. There's no natural selection. There's no specific trait that's better or worse in that particular environment. And there's no mutations. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Mrs. Ronstadt, none of those things are really true. We know that things mutate over time, just randomly. We know that certain traits are selected for or against. We know that there's sometimes small populations. We know that organisms select for specific traits when they're mating with another partner. We know that there's gene flow constantly, and that's true. And we're going to look at that here at the bottom, is when the conditions aren't met. But first, we're going to really quickly just write down the equations and and then we are going to deal with these in class. But one of the equations is P plus Q equals 1, where P is the frequency of the dominant allele, and Q is the frequency of the recessive allele. And then the other equation that we're going to be able to look at is, I'm going to kind of write it over here, is P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared equals 1. And these are just going to be the homozygous dominant phenotype. This is going to be the heterozygous, and this is going to be the homozygous recessive. And we, again, will deal with these in class. We're not going to get into how to solve problems or how to deal with it, but there's math that we can prove if a population is at Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium or not. And so what if these conditions aren't met? What if these 5 conditions that we talked about up there are not met, and we could even maybe mathematically prove that they're not met? Then that population's evolving. That's what we know. Then the population is evolving. It's not at Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, because if you go back to the principle, it says the frequency of alleles and genotypes in a population's gene pool remains constant over generations unless acted upon by agents other than normal sexual recombination. So these agents, these 5 conditions, are acting on this population and changing the allele frequencies over time. And so that population is now evolving.